Okay, this screencast is going to continue discussing groups that are not seeing the changes that they're hoping to see following the American Revolution. I wanted to add one more thing about women that I didn't quite get to in class. In terms of a few other changes that do happen after the Revolution, besides this principle of Republican motherhood and divorce laws being liberalized, women will have better opportunities regarding education. There were new academies built around the years kind of following the revolution that offer a more rigorous education for women specifically. And these educated women are the ones who are actually going to challenge women's roles in America in the aftermath of this era and then into like the women's rights movement in the late 1800s. So we're going to get there eventually. But I want to just mention that educational opportunities were a little different afterwards, mainly for the wealthy women, but it does happen. The second group that we're going to talk about is the slaves, and they are probably the group you first thought of when considering who did not get to benefit from things like liberty and equality in the aftermath of the Revolution. So the revolutionary notion that all men are created equal seemed to have somewhat of an effect on northern states. We're going to start seeing more and more northern states abolishing slavery following the Revolution. Keep in mind that you have African slaves fighting on both sides in the American Revolution. You have some fighting with the Loyalists, just like we discussed in Unit 2 in Virginia, being promised freedom. But you also have some slaves fighting with the colonial army. And those veterans, especially on the colonial side, they're going to expect greater freedom and start pushing for an end to slavery following the end of this war. And in the northern states, they do seem to be buying into that idea because we're going to start seeing states like New Hampshire, Vermont, Massachusetts, Pennsylvania start to change their state constitutions where they are outlawing slavery and abolishing it in their state. But the South is going to kind of do the exact opposite. They are going to continue expanding slavery into new territories in the years that follow the Revolution. Some of the Southerners who were in charge and in leadership positions like Jefferson think that slavery is a practice that's eventually going to fade away. But really, that's not quite how it happens. It's going to actually get much worse throughout this unit and the next unit before it gets better. And we will talk about that, like I said, between units 3 and 4. Another group we're going to talk about are the Native Americans who don't experience much change in the way that they would maybe hope to see. But during the war, most tribes actually allied with the British side, which is what you see kind of happening in this picture. Honestly, the natives see the American colonists as the more direct threat to them. That's who they're having to deal with on a day-to-day basis. They see them as far more of a threat than the British themselves. Americans are the land-hungry, populace who are eating up their land in the East. And so they're going to side with the English who lose. And Americans kind of want to punish that behavior. Now, after the war, Americans are super land-hungry. If they were hungry for land before, they're even hungrier now. Recall that they had possessed, England had possessed territory east of the Mississippi that they had not been allowed to settle. They were denied all territory west of the Appalachian Mountains per the proclamation line. But now they find themselves having won the war against England, and now they're in control of everything east of the Mississippi River. So we are going to see some land conflicts between Americans and natives break out, a few fights. But Americans really can't afford another big war just yet. So there's going to be some just coercion and negotiating with the natives over land bargains, but that will kind of play out. There is a general trend in U.S. history of pushing the Native Americans further and further west as American colonists expand further west into territory as time goes on. But at this time, you still have, like, in the southeastern portion of U.S. territory, like kind of in the, Florida, Mississippi region, you still have several groups in control of that region overall. The Cherokee, the Choctaw, the Seminoles, the Creeks. Meanwhile, like west of the Mississippi, natives are pretty much fully in charge. The Comanche and the Sioux are two examples of that, groups west of the river. The last group we'll talk about in terms of changes after the Revolution and wanting more change and not necessarily seeing it, it's actually going to be a little more complicated than the other three, and that's class divisions. You do kind of have internal conflicts between class divisions. Honestly, the Founding Fathers tend to represent the elite class within the colonies, not the poor man. So it's hard for them to relate because they are a little more privileged overall in their adulthood especially. So some of the changes that come place tend to benefit that class, that upper class, more so than the poorer classes. Many of the soldiers who fought in the Revolution didn't own property. And to own property meant to be a voter. Like, you had to own property to have voting rights in most states. So we're gonna, after the Revolution is fought, those soldiers will demand a little more justice and equality. We will see it change a little bit, but American leaders do want to maintain their focus on the importance of owning property and education. They very much aim to keep the power in the hands of the elite. That's something to think about, as that will change over time. But in the beginning, that's definitely a goal. We're going to talk about an event known as Shay's Rebellion in class tomorrow and actually watch a video on the matter. A pretty long video, actually. It will take the majority of class. So please save the notes as you have them now, and we will talk about Shay's Rebellion in class tomorrow. I hope you all have a good evening, and we'll go over any questions you have tomorrow.